Okay, welcome everybody. I guess we're ready to begin now. We want to thank everyone for joining us for the presentation from Shira Leibowitz, PhD. Shira is the CEO of Discovery Village Child Care Center in Tarrytown, New York, in Westchester County. And her presentation today is navigating PPP loan forgiveness strategies. And before Shira begins, I just want to thank Kangaroo Time, who has co-sponsored this, and Genevieve Carbone. They're co-sponsoring with the Child Care Council of Westchester this event. Also with us today is one of the presenters. We have Gabriella Montano. Gabriella works for the Child Care Council, and as people have questions, we're encouraging you to please enter them into the chat function, and at a certain point or certain points along the way, Shira will break to take some of the questions. At that point, Gabby will read the questions. Gabby is bilingual, so if people are more comfortable asking the questions in the chat function in Spanish, please feel free to do so, and Gabby will interpret. And with that, I want to turn it over to Shira. Shira, thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Please don't hesitate to introduce yourself in the chat and ask questions. So, and we'll pause throughout. This presentation is about navigating through PPP loan forgiveness strategies. This is changing quickly. Congress right now is discussing possible changes, and we'll talk about that, and we'll find ways to update you as it changes. This is not necessarily about how to have the entire loan forgiven, although we'll touch on that if that is your strategy, but strategies that you might take towards approaching the loan and approaching your child care center to come out of these very challenging days. First of all, to come out and survive at the end, and even more to be stronger. A disclaimer, I am not an attorney, I am not an accountant, and this presentation is not intended to be given legal or financial advice. It does make good sense to have an attorney, to have an accountant, to have an HR specialist. This touches on labor law, and to be in touch with your lender. But there is an affirmation separate from the disclaimer, who I am and why am I giving this webinar. I'm an educator. I was a principal for 20 years. On July 1st, I opened my own child care center and was, like all of you, thrown into this experience of shutdown and COVID-19, and knew that I had to learn fast a lot so that my business, my child care center, could survive. And what I've learned, in the words of the great Maya Angelou, when you learn, you teach, when you get, you give. I learned a lot and realized that other centers in particular, as well as small businesses, might benefit. So when we were still in the stage of applying for loans, and there still is money left, you can still apply for loans. If there's anyone out there who has not yet, I'm happy to help you with that. I was supporting centers to apply for loans, and now I wanted to give information on the forgiveness process. My email is on the screen. You can take a photo shot of it, shira@discoveryvillagecenter.com. As you have any questions, don't hesitate to get back to me. When all of this happened, I very badly wanted to do something to support. I'm not a healthcare worker. I can't do that. I can't help people who are ill. But there were questions and challenges childcare centers were asking that I needed to answer for myself, and that I felt was a way that I could give meaningful support. So this presentation, they're not going to be beautiful slides. They're pretty dense. You can take pictures of them. We'll make the deck available to you because we're going through technically a lot of information. I want you to understand from in the weeds how to fill out these applications, and also more conceptually how you can understand how you want to approach your loan, bringing back employees and paying people again. So best is if you have a copy of the SBA application in front of you. The link is on the screen. The Child Care Council sent it out before. You can go to the SBA website. If you don't have it in front of you, it's okay. the slides are kind of going to go through page by page. Know that the application from the SBA is likely not what you're going to be filling out. Your lender, whoever lent you the money, is going to have their own application. It will likely be digital, but it will likely be very similar and based on what the SBA application offers. So just a really quick review. If you're on this call, you probably have a PPP loan. If you don't, reach out to me. You can still get one. But a really quick review. PPPs were loans up to 2.5 months of average monthly payroll that are forgivable if you follow their stipulations. Forgivable for payroll and for certain non-payroll expenses. So mortgage, interest, rent, or utilities for an 8-week period following getting the loan. If you decrease the number of employees you have, or their wages, or the amount of hours they work, there's a percentage decrease, and we'll talk about that. The amount of the loan not forgivable it can be repaid over 2 years at 1% interest as a loan. Changes are coming. So this is really significant. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and 130 other trade groups went to Congress and asked for change. When the PPP loan legislation was passed, people kind of optimistically thought that we would be shut down for 8 weeks, maybe a little more, and businesses would be ready to start again. That's not been the case for many industries. So they asked that more than 75% be able to be, less than 75% need to be spent on payroll, because lots of businesses are shut down and don't have payroll, and unemployment has been generous. They asked that businesses have more than 8 weeks to spend the money, and they asked that businesses have a longer time from June 30th to rehire employees. The House has answered, and the House has passed the Paycheck Protection Plan flexibility. The Senate is right now discussing it. In the House's version of the bill, up to 40% now can be spent on non-payroll expenses. So still the same expenses, rent, interest on mortgage, or utilities. But up to 40%, not 25%. So when we go through the application, that's going to change the calculations significantly. They extend the time period you can use the loan from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. So if you're a childcare center and you've been closed and you're thinking about opening, you have more time to bring back your people and to spend down the loan. They're increasing the time in which you have to repay any portion of the loan that isn't forgiven to 5 years from 2 years, still at 1% interest. So a longer period of time to repay the loan. They're gonna still permit businesses to defer payroll taxes. So right now, you're allowed to defer payroll taxes through the end of 2020. Once your loan is forgiven, you're not. This would allow you to continue to defer payroll taxes. You still have to pay them, but you can do that later. And they are allowing to extend rehiring your people from June 30th to December 31st. So your loan can still be forgiven if you're back to pre-crisis levels by December 31st. And there's certain exemptions where you can count people as part of the being paid back if they choose not to come back, or if your state is legislating COVID-related requirements that require you to have fewer people. The Senate is talking about this now. Then it's unclear what they're going to do, but it looks like they're trying to do something quickly. They might simply pass what the House proposed, which seemed unthinkable at first, but it's thinkable right now. Or they might have some changes. So they might keep the requirement to spend 75%, not 60% on payroll. They might look to extend the time you can pay the roll to 16 weeks instead of 24 weeks. And the one piece that they have that's more generous than the House's version is they might allow you to spend non-payroll portions on personal protective equipment and other infection preventing investments, deep cleaning, sterilizing, things like that. So the Senate is deliberating. Either they'll do nothing, they'll pass the House's version, or they'll pass a different version. If they pass a different version, then that becomes negotiated. So, and they would resolve the differences through the process that they use. So, that's in process. Now, something significant that has not been widely shared, and I don't know how accurate it is, but you have to keep this in mind as we go through different strategies for forgiveness. Marco Rubio, who is the Republican senator from Florida, sorry, better go back, and he chairs the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, has said that passing this bill, that as is, that the Treasury would be stipulating that if you do not spend 60% of the money on payroll, you get no forgiveness. So 59.9% you spend on payroll, you don't get any forgiveness. That's not in the current version. Rubio has been quoted as saying that. Unclear whether it's accurate, but we'll try through Westchester Child Care Council and Kangaroo Time to send information and updates on that, because that will change potentially your strategy of how you spend your money, because you'll need to get up to the 60%. When will you find out about loan forgiveness? When do you have to get your application? Once your 8-week period, or if it extends to 16 weeks or 24 weeks. It doesn't look like you have to get the application in immediately. You'll have some time to fill out these forms, collect your documentation, although it's a good idea to be collecting your documentation as it happens throughout. But your lender will tell you that. So that's a little bit unclear. The deadline is October 31st. Then this is going to take time for you to get an answer, likely. Your lender has 60 days to make a decision and submit it to the SBA. And then the SBA has 90 days to pay back the lender. So it could be up to 5 months before you get an answer. So there's a lot of uncertainty around this, and it's just important for you to know what's possible in this whole process. And again, it's changing by the day. There will be an appeals process. So if your lender doesn't give you the answer that you believe is fair and appropriate, you can appeal that, and there'll be a process released on how. Just want to pause a minute, because that was a lot of information, and then we're going to go through a case study of an imaginary child care center. The numbers are made up. This is not my center, but it's just to show you what forgiveness would look like in a couple of different strategies taken to approach the loan. So, Gabriela, were there any questions so far that we want to answer?
Yes, we have quite a few. I can start with the first one.
Mm-hmm.
First is, could you please go over how to do the forgiveness for self-employed, no employees, for family childcare home providers?
Yes, it's going to be very similar, but your only salary is yourself. So as we go through the application, it's the same application, whether you're self-employed or just the documentation and forms will be a little bit different, but we'll go through that.
Okay, next question. We have 2 estimated bills for our gas and trash collections. These are estimated bills for the coming months. Can we claim these under the PPP even though they are estimated and not actual?
Unclear. Gas, as far as I know, trash collection is not counted as utilities. Gas is. If the bill is either incurred or paid during the period. So if the bill is incurred, I believe that you can. You'll have to collect all of those documentations and check with your lender. Again, anything I say, if your lender says differently, your lender is right and I'm wrong.
Next question. Do changes apply to those who have already received funding?
Yes. Hello?
Okay, next question is, how will these potential changes benefit those of us whose PPP will end next week?
Yeah, so that's the rush in the Senate. And we'll go through the different strategies. If you've already spent it, if you've taken the position that you're going to spend all your money and it's fully forgiven, it won't. You've gotten your loan fully forgiven. nobody's getting more money than the loan. So there's not more money coming out. If you haven't spent all your money and your loan would only be partially forgiven, it benefits you because now you, like everybody else, has the additional 16 weeks or 24 weeks or however much time is given. So that it applies to everybody whenever your loan is up, whenever your 8-week period ends.
Next question. When will the amended bill be passed?
We have no idea. Whenever the Senate finish it, if it's in the hands of the Senate, we don't know. So just try to follow the news. It's hard to find it, and we'll try to give updates. That's out of everybody's hands except Congress's.
Next. If you think we may need to pay starting in December, should you pay even if you apply for forgiveness?
I'm not really sure I understand the question, but when we go through the strategies, we'll walk through what decisions you may be making for your business, because there's not only one correct way to do this. There are a lot of choices to be made for child care center owners.
Next. When we talk payroll forgiveness, is it 1, only net payroll, 2, only gross with no payroll taxes, or 3, any other versions?
We'll go through that. It's gross with whatever payroll taxes the employee owes. So the gross amount you pay the employee is forgivable, not the taxes the employer knows. For employers, state and local taxes, so in New York, it's state unemployment insurance. In other states, it may be a little bit different what you owe the state. Some cities, there may be local taxes. For me, there aren't. For me, it's New York State unemployment insurance, but it's state and local taxes on, not any taxes, state and local taxes, not federal, on compensation. There are some other things, and when we go through, we'll talk about what's considered. I see some other, the adjusted alternative, we'll get to that. Hazard pay, yes, you can, we'll get to that. Water bill trash pickup is not included. Very specific on what's considered utilities at this point. Staff are doing distant learning. I'm just looking, our program is to end June. Do I have to pay them through June 30th? I'll go through the suggestions. You don't have to do anything. You're going to make choices as to how you want to pay your staff. 401k and health insurance are considered part of salary expenses. Absolutely. Can you prepay rent? No. The cost, I don't think so. You'll have to check with your lender. The costs have to be incurred or paid during, it's not intended to prepay ahead. Those are the questions I see right now. We'll pause again for questions. I want to go through, this is a hypothetical daycare, Happy Days Daycare, 14 staff members, a director, assistant director, 3 full-time head teachers, 6 full-time assistant teachers, and 3 half-time floaters. This is just going to give you data, but you in your mind are going to be thinking about your own center. Look at the application if you have it as we go through. So Happy Days, these are the federal loans Happy Days received. You're going to look at what loans you received. They received a payroll protection loan in the amount of $85,467.98. You should be thinking in your mind, what PPP loan and what amount did you receive as we look through this? Some of you may have received an advance on an EIDL loan, emergency injury disaster loan. You were able to get advances of up to $10,000 depending on the number of employees. So it was $1,000 for employees, up to $10,000 if you had 10 or more employees. That never has to be returned. It's a grant, even if you end up not getting the EIDL loan. However, it is subtracted from the amount. It's connected to the PPP loan, so it's subtracted from the amount. So we're showing that Happy Days, they have 14 employees. They got the EIDL loan for $10,000. So whatever their forgiveness amount is going to be $10,000 left. Here's payroll information. So you're going to go through, so their total monthly payroll is, you'll look at yours, $34,187.19. Their loan was 2.5 times that amount. I'm just looking, our state is giving us bonuses for staff that are working with kids during this time. Can those be included in payroll forgiveness? It's only included if you pay it, not if your state pays it. These are for out-of-pocket expenses that you as an organization pay. Bonuses, raises, hazard pay, special project pay, special pay for distance learning classes, all of that can be included. You can pay your people more. Self-employed, yes, you're using the Schedule C of the personal 1040 to calculate the loan, and you're in essence paying back your own salary. And we'll talk about what owners' salaries are capped at. PPP ends June 12th. Okay, we're gonna get through alternate payroll. They really want to pay for the full 8 weeks of payroll. So we're going to get to that and how that works. Yes, someone's asking, when I say the 10,000 is subtracted, it's subtracted from the PPP, meaning if you get the full loan forgiven, it's forgiven minus $10,000. So you can't double dip and get both fully forgiven. So other expenses that are going to go into this, owners can pay themselves. So if your tax structure is such that you as an owner are not on payroll, LLC, owners can't put themselves on payroll, they take draw, you can include that up to a cap. Health insurance, retirement benefits, any compensation for owners or for anybody else cannot be more than what would be prorated 100,000 for the year. So that amount is $15,385 for owners. Owners' compensation or anybody's compensation for that matter. So nobody can be forgiven, no salary can be forgiven more than more than $15,385. So that's all compensation, health insurance costs, retirements, any benefits, and salary. But that can be included in. So if you're independent, you can pay yourself. The amount has to equal what you paid yourself in 2019 or January, February of 2020. You can use either of those two terms. State and local taxes are included. And again, your rent, mortgage, and utilities, those are the expenses included. There's a lot of webinars on how to get your loan fully forgiven. You might want to do that. You might need to do that depending on what Congress passes, but you might not. You might choose not to. So if things were as they are, you had 8 weeks, you weren't ready to bring everybody back, you could choose for some of this to be a loan. So we're looking at Happy Days Daycare. Strategy 1, they furloughed all their staff. They shut down. They felt that was the safe and responsible thing to do. They're using the PPP as a loan. They got the 10,000 idle advance, and they can keep that as a grant. If they end up having to spend 60% on payroll at some point, they're then going to shift that strategy. They're going to bring their people back. They're going to pay them, even if they have to pay them advances, and they'll get up to that 60%. But this was prepared as of what we know as of today, which could change by tomorrow. Strategy 2, Happy Days. They're paying everyone their regular salary, and they have the entire loan forgiven, except for that $10,000 on the idle advance. If they're paying everyone their regular salary, either they're operating by distance learning and everybody's working, they're open and everybody's working, some combination, or people are not working and they're paying them anyway. However that works out, that's a strategy that you could use. It's been really challenging because we couldn't plan in advance. All of this is happening in real time, and we have to really quickly navigate and make choices that are the best for our centers and our businesses. Strategy 3 is a kind of hybrid. Paying staff they need to run the center. They're inviting staff back as enrollment warrants. So some people are back, not all people. In that case, the loan will be partially forgiven, again, minus the 10,000 idle advance. If the Treasury stipulations that might come in that you have to pay up to 60%, they'll have to make sure that they paid at least 60% in salary. This is significant. It wasn't clear before. The SBA recently issued new rules in all 3 strategies. You can give bonuses, You can give raises. That has to be capped for the 8-week period. Nobody can be forgiven, can receive compensation more than $15,385. So you can't decide to pay 3 teachers, no matter how stellar a job they're doing, more than, or however many teachers more than that to get up to your 60%. I'm just gonna pause and look at questions. I'm gonna get to the alternate payroll, how you figure out the times of payroll. Why do assistants and floaters make the same? That's what Happy Days decided to do. However your pay scale is, your pay scale is. This is an imaginary daycare center. Are employees collecting unemployment insurance or draining the unemployment insurance fund accumulated over years? Is that part accounted as a credit to your payroll? No, sadly it's not. And unemployment expenses are going to go up dramatically for small businesses, and that I don't think Congress has even begun to address. So, yes.
There are a number of questions in the Q&A function as well. I don't know if you want to have Gabby start going through there.
Yes, please. Let me go through here the chat, and then I'll ask Abby. So, unemployment insurance fund you put into, that's for nonprofits. For-profits pay insurance. For all of us, that's going to be complicated. It's beyond what I know at this point, and something to keep our eyes on. Please explain the EIDL deduction from the PPP. You can't double dip. So if you got money from EIDL, it's subtracted from the forgiveness amount of the PPP. You don't get to keep both unforgiven. For mortgage interest incurred during the period, but not due till after the period ends, can we still claim that? Yes, you can. Expenses incurred, but not yet due, count. And you can pay them. You just have to pay them by the time they would normally be due. You can't hold off longer. If dental and vision are a benefit, can I include? Yes, those are payroll expenses. Dental, vision, health, retirement, any paid vacation, paid family leave, any benefit that costs you money. 2 owners is $15,385 for both? No. For each owner can make up to $15,385. Again, if that's what they made in the comparison period. So you can choose as a comparison period 2019, and that would be average earnings over over 2019, prorated to an 8-week period, or it can be January, February of 2020. You can choose whichever is more beneficial to you. Let's see. What if your staff is working part-time and is receiving unemployment? Can we still get their part-time wages forgiven? Yes, with a reduction. So if you've reduced staff more than if they've reduced salaries or hours more than 25%, there is a penalty to that, a percentage penalty, just like if you don't have all your people back. So we'll look at that. No, after you use your P loan, you can apply for another PPP loan. It looks from Congress that there will not be more federal loans given. You can apply to the SBA for an EIDL, an emergency injury disaster loan. They had been, there was a period of time we could all apply, and so some of us got those advances. Then they shut it down and were only giving it to agriculture. That happened very quietly through Congress without any news announcement to anybody, and people just saw it on the SBA website. You have to really be watching what's going on, but potentially at some point they'll open that up again. The cap is per owner or per employee. So highly paid employees, this is any employee paid $100,000 or more. It's capped at, again, that what would equal $100,000. The bonus cap is everybody. I just made up Happy Days, but the information I'm giving is what the SBA is saying for everybody. So cap is $15,385 of forgivable expenses, compensation, cash and non-cash, includes health, vision, dental, retirement, anything not more than that can be forgiven, but up to that can. Our mortgage is deferred for several months. Do we have the option of paying anyway and claiming it through PPP? If the mortgage is incurred, yes, you don't have to accept the deferral. That I would think. You check with an accountant, check with your lender, but it seems to me anything incurred or paid during the time period is covered. Money paid by the staff for health benefits, yes, that's covered. Anything you pay the gross that you pay your staff, so whatever you actually pay each staff person is covered, their gross wages, regardless of what they have to take out for taxes or for benefits. Can self-employed be paid more than the average of 8 weeks of 2019 income? No, you're paid based on what you were paid, what you reported to the IRS, either for 2019 or for January, February 2020. I got both and an idle beyond the 10,000. You're fine with the idle beyond the 10,000 because that's a loan and you're paying that back. But it's the 10,000 grant that you can't double dip on. 60% payroll forgiveness, we'll get to that. The 10K is separate. It only comes off at the end. After you've done the whole calculation, they subtract it. It's not part of the math in terms of the calculation. They've opened, I'm getting information from Bonnie Caddy. Thank you. They've opened idle disaster grants. You're a preschool and just received a loan. Congratulations. Awesome news. And thank you for sharing. You can give a bonus to anybody on your payroll, not just directors. Everybody can get bonuses. There is no stipulation on paying people more. Again, just not more than up to the cap of $15,385. All right, in the Q&A, Gabriella, you want to read me those?
Sure. Right now, my staff are doing distant learning. Our program is ending June 19th. Do I have to pay them through June 30th?
Well, you pay them for the work that they do. So this is oh, you're saying okay, they have to be on payroll. So you can't have a 1099. So if they're on payroll and getting salary, that's what you're reporting. If they're working by June 30th, or if it's extended to December 31st or whatever date Congress decides, you have till that day to rehire everybody or there's a penalty. So if you're paying them because they're working hours now, but after June 30th, you're shut down for the summer and they're not working, that's a really good question. I actually hadn't thought about programs closed for the summer. You might qualify as seasonal workers. We'll have to look into that and try to get back to you. Other questions? Gabby, are there other questions? Or I'll go on.
Yes. If you paid health insurance 4 days before you got PPP for the month of May, does it count?
No. I'll get to that. Actually, let me go through a little bit more and then we'll pause again for questions.
No problem.
So, so now we're going to really go through the application. Now we're going to get into the weeds of what this looks like, what the numbers you need are, and how it looks differently depending on the choices that you make for your business. We're going to mostly go through this assuming that there isn't that 60% cap, but I'll explain what that means if it changes. So the application is 11 pages. I hope you have it in front of you. Read the instructions before you start. This is my advice. You'll do it however you want, but I think you need to read the instructions, read through the full 11 pages, and have a conceptual understanding of what they're going to ask. Then you'll look back to the instructions as you're filling it out. So pages 1 and 2 are instructions. Page 3 is the beginning of the application. So it's the loan forgiveness application. They're going to ask you basic information about your business. You're going to fill that in. This will probably be digital from your lender. It'll probably look a little bit different, and some of this may be pre-populated if your lender is a bank where you have an account. They'll ask for your loan information. That will probably be pre-populated. When my loan is through Chase, Chase hadn't given me that information. I called them and found it out. And then a few days later, got an email from Chase that they would be pre-populating it. So this is all basic information. Now they're going to ask for some information, and I'm going to point out to you where the information, they're going to ask you how many employees you have. They're going to ask this many times in many ways. Not all of it is actually relevant to the calculations, so why they're asking it is a little bit unclear, but whatever they ask, you're going to answer. So they're going to ask you employees at the time of the loan application. The loans went live on April 3rd. So, you know, the day that you applied for the loan, for Happy Days, I set it at April 6th. That's when it became available at Chase and when I applied, but it could have been any date. So whatever that date is, how many employees did you have? Whatever that number was. So in Happy Days case, if it's already April 3rd, April 6th, people are already on shelter in place in many states, they might have already furloughed everybody. That's strategy one. They might have furloughed nobody. So their full-time equivalency is 12.5 people. We'll look at full-time equivalency. It's based on 40 hours, not 30 hours. So that's a little more employee favorable. So some of their people are not full-time. Everybody working. Strategy three, this is, they see their enrollment going down. They've stayed open for a very small number of probably essential workers, and they have 4 people out of their 12 and a half full-time equivalents working. We'll go through. So these are the different scenarios. Think about your scenario, what you've actually chosen, and how that's going to play out now as you move forward, how you're going to bring people back. Now employees, so now why does it matter how many employees you had when you applied for the application? It actually doesn't, because that's not going to be part of the calculation, but they ask it, so you'll tell them. Employees at the time of forgiveness, June 30th. This may be extended to December 31st, but assuming for now it's June 30th, this is relevant because this is going to figure into how much forgiveness are you eligible for. So strategy 1, 0, the center's still closed. They keep the PPP as a loan, not a grant. Strategy 2, they have everybody still working, and you'll see as this plays out, the full loan amount is forgiven. It becomes a grant. Again, except for the $10,000 that then they don't pay back. They do have to pay back the $10,000. That becomes as they would pay back the rest of their EIDL loan. Strategy 3, they have 9 people. So they have 9 out of their 12.5. They're bringing people back, and we'll look at the calculations. There will be a penalty for not being back up to pre-crisis levels, but they're going to get a lot of the loan, a portion of the loan forgiven, quite a lot actually. Okay, you're going to fill out if you got an EIDL advance. You're going to fill out how often you pay your people, bi-weekly, weekly, whatever it is. Now, this is really significant, and a bunch of people were asking questions, so I want to make sure that it's really clear, and then we can pause for some questions. So the covered period, the SBA and Congress and the Department of Treasury want to pay people for 8 weeks. Maybe it'll be extended to 16, maybe to 24. But when it was passed, they wanted to pay people for 8 weeks. So when does that start? Initially, they said it starts the moment the money is deposited in your account. Now, all of you who are on payroll know that's really complicated because maybe you're in the middle of a payroll. So how does that work? Do you have to prorate? How do you figure it out? That would be really complicated, fairly complicated accounting. So you don't have to do that. The covered period can start on the first day of the first payroll following the day the money was deposited in your account. So for Happy Days, their numbers don't match my center, but their time period does. So these are real time periods that could exist, that do exist in my case. So my PPP loan was deposited in my bank on April 30th. So therefore my 8-week period, 56 days, would go from April 30th to June 24th. However, April 31st was a payday. May 4th was the beginning of a new payroll. So I pay biweekly. So I can set my alternate covered period from May 4th to June 28th. My non-payroll expenses still go by April 30th to June 24th, but the alternate means you're actually paying for 8 weeks of payroll. So it doesn't matter when you pay them. I mean, it does matter. You have to pay by the regular payroll. You can keep to your regular scheduled payroll. So if you pay every 2 weeks, you don't have to change when you were scheduled to pay your people. You start from the first day of payroll and you cover 8 weeks, meaning the last payroll will be paid a week later. But as long as you pay by the scheduled payroll time, these are 8 weeks of incurred payroll. So I want to just pause there. Gabrielle, are there any questions there? And can people just, kind of give a note as to whether that's clear or not? Because that's significant, and it was really done to help small businesses in I think, a smart way.
Yes, we have 34 questions listed here. We just go through it quickly.
Okay.
When does the 8 weeks start?
The day the money is deposited in your account.
Next question. So it's okay to re-freeload staff until unemployment and keep PPP funds when we reopen?
Wait, repeat that question?
So it's okay to re-furlough staff until unemployment and keep PPP funds for when we reopen?
Yes. It's sort of. Your PPP funds may or may not be forgiven, right? So the worst thing that could happen, which for some centers is not bad at all, it could just be a loan. So if you want your people to be furloughed, you're closed, you don't want to pay them now, you want to wait till they come back, that's scenario one. Your loan isn't forgiven, but it's a loan. You can use it. You can pay it back early. There's no penalty for prepayment, or you can use it. If the time is extended, 16 weeks, 24 weeks, when you're ready to bring people back, you can still now that's what the conversation in Congress is really about. And it stemmed from businesses that were required to shut down. It makes perfect sense. You'll have more time to bring your people back and to start paying them.
Next question. Can I claim for an independent contractor?
No, you can't. Because independent contractors can claim for themselves. They're not on your payroll. You can only claim for W-2 employees or for owners, again, up to the limit on owners.
Got the funds early May in the process of reopening, leaves on only 4 weeks to use the funds. What are my options?
Well, that's what we're going through now. So as we go through the different strategies, I'll show you the options and how that'll play out differently. The piece of advice that I would give to you on this is don't think only about how much money you're going to get back. Worst case, this is a loan, and at 1% interest, that's about the best loan you could possibly get. Think about what is going to strengthen your center. So I'll share with you my story here because it may be illustrative. We all have our stories, I know. When all of this happened in March, I was pretty determined to stay open and to not furlough any staff. My staff became frightened. We're in Westchester, New York, downstate New York. It was a COVID hotspot. People became frightened, and I ended up closing for 8 school days the end of March. During that time, we did a deep disinfecting. We spoke to a lot of people. We came up with COVID health and safety procedures, and we brought people back. When I brought people back, I brought everybody back, and enrollment was very low. At our lowest point, we had about 6 kids. Now I'm up to about 22, but I had almost a full staff with almost no kids. And we were trying to develop curriculum, and we were doing Zoom classes, and people were working and trying and decorating the center, but it was a lot of adults around with not a lot of kids. I did not get the PPP loan on the first. I applied through Chase. I applied within hours of it going on the application and did not get, funds ran out before I got the loan first time around. When that happened, I furloughed everybody except for 3 people, and the 4 of us, and then 1 got sick. So 3 of us ran the center for 2 weeks. Got the PPP loan and brought some more people back. When I brought people back, I rethought my strategy. So you may at certain points have that experience where so initially I was going to pay everybody. Those initial payrolls were coming out of my savings before I got the PPP. I thought the PPP would then help me through the end of June, and I'd figure out where we were in July, applied for an EIDL, figured that would then help me through the summer, and kind of we would figure it out in steps. I made the decision that for the safety of the kids, for the safety of the staff, for learning how to function in this COVID environment, we weren't going to bring everybody back right away. We were going to bring people back as we were ready. And we really did a redesign of the program. So what are your options? Your options are whatever makes sense for your center. Those choices will have implications for how much of the loan is returned. And that's your choice. So I made the decision that I didn't care if the whole loan was returned. I wanted my center to not only survive, be here next January, but to be a stronger center. So as you go through, you're going to think, and if anybody wants to email me and follow up, I'm happy to help you think this through, but you really have to think about your own situation. It's going to be different based on the reality of your center, but you do have a lot of options here. Those options, again, do have lots of implications for lots of areas of your business, including how much of your loan will be forgiven. Okay, other questions?
Yes. Will hazard bonuses be included in payroll expenses and 75%?
Yes.
Next question. What does it mean that 10K is subtracted from PPP? Does it make it so I have to 75% payroll of the 10K plus PPP?
Once you figure out your forgivable amount, and I'm going to go through and show you how to do those calculations. If you got the 10K through EIDL, whatever your forgivable amount is, it's going to be 10K less than that. They're going to subtract 10K from how much they'll forgive you. Next question.
Yes. My payroll happened to fall conveniently so that I had 10 weeks of payroll during the 8 weeks. Can I include all 10 weeks of payroll?
No, it's for 8 weeks. So you'll have to really look closely. They're paying for 8 weeks of payroll, incurred and paid. So I'm not really understanding how that 10 weeks worked. I think you're not understanding where if you thought that you could pay, if you were on the last day of payroll and you thought, and the money was deposited, if you thought that it would count for that whole 2-week prior period, it doesn't. That's not how it works. It counts for 8 weeks. If they extend it, and they likely will, to 16 weeks or 24 weeks, then it's for the 16 weeks or 24 weeks. It's not for more than whatever Congress decides it's for.
Next question. Will we get a copy of this PowerPoint?
Yes.
Does owner health insurance count as payroll?
It depends how owners are paid. If your tax structure is such that the owner is on payroll, they do. If your tax structure is such like an LLC where the owner is paid by a draw and not on payroll, it counts up to the $15,385 that max you can pay an owner. Either way, honestly, it works out the same because you pay however you pay owners. Their total comp can't be more than $15,300 out of $385, whether that's on payroll or whether that's as an owner's draw.
Next, I believe it's a statement, maybe you could just confirm, indicated that forgiveness for owner's comp is limited to $15,385, including benefits. Including benefits,
total amount. So you can't, that's not $15,385 cash plus health insurance and vision and dental retirement. It's $15,385 total, no more than that, for cash and non-cash compensation. And that's for everybody, owners, employees, nobody gets more than that forgiven.
For the loan forgiveness, can I add health insurance, 401k, dental, vision, and life insurance?
Yes, those are all acceptable payroll expenses.
Is this different for non-owners making more than 100K a year? Asked differently, can cost of health benefits be included for loan forgiveness for non-owner employee?
Not more than 15,385. So, and when we get to the application, I'll show you where you have to list employees separately, those who make total under 100 and those who make 100,000 or more. The amount forgiven is capped for anybody at 15,385.
Next question. So the EIDL becomes a loan, not a grant?
Yes.
Next, can you use 100% of the funds for forgiveness?
Yes. Yes. If you follow the rules, their guidelines, you can get 100% of the loan forgiven. Again, then you won't also get the EIDL that you got won't be a grant then, so that won't be forgiven. You can't get both forgiven.
Next, can you revisit the bonus cap of 15,385? Is this specific to Happy Days?
No, anyone. I just made up Happy Days. They don't actually exist. 15,385 is the ruling of the Department of Treasury on how much compensation can be forgiven.
Next question. If you think you may need to pay starting in December, should you pay even if you apply for forgiveness?
If you need to pay beginning,
I can read it again. If you think you may need to pay starting in December, should you pay even if you apply for forgiveness?
so I'm not really sure what it means. If you think that you're not going to open again until December, you're going to have to make decisions as to whether you pay your people or not. If I'm not understanding your question and you want to email me later, you can, but I don't think I understand that question.
Next, does getting an EIDL disaster loan affect PPP forgiveness?
No, the only thing it affects, you can get both. The only thing it affects is that none of the EIDL would be then considered a grant. You can't get both the EIDL advance and the PPP forgiven, but you can get both loans and then the EIDL is a loan.
Next question. So if I furlough employees end of March, our center is still running at 50% enrollment along with teachers. I have used the extra money as hazard pay. However, I will not meet the FTE. Don't feel safe bringing staff back just to have them here as we are currently in a hotspot. Will I not have any forgiveness?
You'll have some forgiveness, and I'm going to get through that. That's my situation. I think that's the situation for a lot of centers. You'll get a decrease in the percentage of what you actually spent based on how far below your pre-crisis staff levels you were. As we go through the application, you're going to see what that actually looks like. That's the strategy that I've taken as well. And I'll show you what that looks like. Okay.
Next question. The 10K EIDL becomes a loan and it's not a grant. Do I need to show documentation of what I spent it on?
Probably. The SBA reserves the right to audit anybody at any time. It's unlikely they're going to be auditing daycare centers. They have other people they're concerned about, but you do have to keep records. So I did get the EIDL. You can't spend it for the same things. That's considered double dipping. So I did get I had 18 staff members pre-crisis. I did get the 10,000 EIDL. I do have both a digital and a paper file of what I'm using, and I keep that as expenses that are not covered by PPP. So just keep a documentation. You don't have to submit it to anyone, but if they ever called you and said they want to see it, you'll have to be prepared to show it to them.
Next question. Are we able to use any money for the PPP we had to buy?
Hello?
Next question. Are
Yeah.
we able to use any money for the PPP we had to buy?
To buy what?
It stopped there. That's the end of the question. I'm a little.
PPE, not the
Oh,
PPP, PPE,
PPE.
we had
PPP.
to buy.
Well, as of today, no. As of the end of the week, maybe. One of the considerations in the Senate's version of the Payroll Protection Flexibility Act is to allow for non-payroll expenses to include PPP and costs for disinfecting and other work to create a COVID-safe work environment. We won't know until Congress passes that act, but it's possible. We'll have to watch and see.
Following question. Can you just give a bonus to your directors and not the other staff?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want as long as it's not discriminatory. So you'll want to be, as you decide on bringing people back from furlough and giving bonuses, you'll want to be careful if you have HR support, if you have an attorney, to make sure that you're not doing this in a discriminatory way. Giving only to certain categories, meaning administration and not staff, would not be considered discriminatory. You'd be fine. If you start wanting to give bonuses to certain employees who you think work harder than others, you could be opening yourself up to charges of discrimination. So you just want to be careful about that.
Next question. I thought the 15,385 was for salary only, but we could add health insurance and retirement on top of that?
No, 15,385 total comp. Check with your lender. If they say something different, they're right and I'm wrong. But from everything I've read, it seems pretty clear to me that that's total.
Next question. Can you include payments you paid for COVID-19 testing?
No.
Next. Wouldn't it be better to wait to the end for question? Before you get through the process, that was just a statement. Do we have to hire everyone back by June 30th?
We'll get to that when we go in. You don't have to do anything, but if you don't, whatever you do, there's going to be implications. We'll get to that.
Do you know if seasonal worker gets special allowance for forgiveness?
No special allowance, but you can choose, you have a little more flexibility in what you're comparing the time frame to. How many more questions do we have? Maybe we should, let's go back to the presentation and then we'll ask more.
No problem. We have 24 as of right now.
Oh, okay. We'll hold them to the end. Let's try to get through. Okay, so now once you get to this point in the application, you can't go further until you go back and you're going to fill out Schedule A worksheet and then Schedule A. You're going to need that information in order to fill out the rest. So you're going to look ahead in the application, and we're going to go through and do that. So, sorry. That's out of my way. So Schedule A, this is a document that you have to keep. You should keep it digitally and physically for 6 years. You don't submit it with your application, but if the SBA ever shows up asking for it, you have to be able to produce it immediately. You're going to fill in the chart, the compensation for each person. There's actually two tables, Table 1 and Table 2. Table 1 is for anyone who makes up to 100,000. Table 2 is for anyone who makes 100,000 or more. And you're going to fill out specifically in those charts, it's the name, their identifier. The identifier is the last four numbers of their social security number, their cash compensation. So what I'm doing is I have a spreadsheet, each payroll, I'm in the midst of it now. I just keep re-adding whatever their gross compensation was. Average full-time equivalency. So are they full-time, or you divide the number of hours by 40 per week, and are they less than full-time? If there's salary or wage reduction more than 25%, you have to write how much in, because that will reduce the amount that you get repaid. So some centers may have said, I'm not furloughing everybody, but I'm going to reduce everybody to 50% time. There is a penalty for that. You can do that. It's a reasonable strategy, but there will be a penalty for it. In strategy 2, everybody stayed employed, everybody's been working, everybody's listed. The total compensation is exactly what you listed in your close to what it listed in your application, and you're going to get filled in. Strategy 3, whoever you brought back, a question was asked about this, is listed, and you list how much compensation. Now, what their compensation is going to be, maybe some of them have been there the whole time. Maybe some of them came back halfway through. Maybe some of them came back 2 days ago. So their compensation is going to be different. It's what you've actually paid them. You can pay bonuses in here. Table 2 is the same thing, but for people who make over 100,000. Okay. Then you're going to look at, now conceptually, what you need to understand here. We'll look at this conceptually, and then we'll get into the weeds about how you fill this out. The purpose of this legislation was to keep people employed and to keep businesses ready after the shutdown to reopen quickly. Life has not played out in a neat way at all, which is what makes this application so messy. But Congress is holding to, and the SBA is, in following Congress, holding to the intent of the legislation, which is to keep people employed, which means that if you don't have everyone employed, or if their salaries or hours have been cut more than 25%, there's still forgiveness, unless that changes, and we'll talk about that, but we'll talk about assuming there's still forgiveness, but it's a percentage reduction. So we'll talk about that. So they're going to ask now a lot of information about full-time equivalencies you had at different times. Some of it's relevant and some of it's not, but you're going to answer all the questions. So they're going to want to know your average full-time equivalents, how many people were working between February 15th and April 26th. You're going to fill it out, but it has nothing to do with the calculation. I don't understand why they're asking it, but they're asking it, so you'll give them that information. So you figuring that out, how many people you had in that time frame. Now, this number is actually relevant. This is how many people in the pay period, including February 15th. So whatever you paid people, where the day February 15th was included in that payroll, you're going to let them know exactly how many people you had. So for Happy Days, it was 12.5 people. That's what was that's who we're working. For you, it's whatever the number was working. Now, if for some reason you have all the daycares in your area have shut down, you've been the only person available to serve the families of essential workers, you're the only one open, and your center has grown and you've hired more people from centers that have shut down, you're safe. You don't have to talk about any reduction. It's theoretically possible somewhere in the country. It's not the case for most of us, but it's possible. If not, we're going to move on. We're going to need to figure out the difference between how many people we had and how many people we now have. So that's the safe harbor. Okay. Now, this number is very relevant. This is your total full-time equivalency. How many people are on your payroll as of June 30th, 2020? This is the number that really matters. This is what they're going to determine your forgiveness based on. This is in legislation right now, so it is likely that the time frame will be extended from June 30th to a date farther in the future. So again, this is changing rapidly, but assuming it were June 30th, you're going to look at how many people you now have on staff. And you're going to do some math. I'll show you what that is to figure out how much you're eligible to be forgiven. Okay. So now you can go back. So you've filled this out. You filled out, basically what you filled out is how many people have worked at different periods of time in the life of your business in the past year, and you filled out how much money they've made from the time you've gotten your loan through the 8-week period, or if it extends to 16 or 24 weeks. Table 1 is going to list an amount of money. Either you've paid them zero, or you've paid them everything you would have paid them, possibly more with hazard pay, or you've paid them some amount below that. You've done those calculations. Now you know that's from your payroll numbers. So they're going to ask how much you paid people. Now they're going to ask you how many people you're paying. Those are the two key numbers. How much did you pay? And how many people are you paying? How many are on your payroll? Now they're going to ask you if you reduced any wages. You may have the same number of people, but all of them are working 50%. So you've reduced wages by 50%. You're going to have to put that, you're going to write that in. You're going to write in, you're giving separate information on people who made under 100,000 and over 100,000, because again, forgiveness is capped at 100,000. You're going to now fill in non-cash compensation payroll costs. There were a lot of questions about this. It's important to know what's included. So health insurance, dental, vision, retirement, vacation, anything that you actually paid, an actual cost to you that went to payroll, and including state and local taxes, not federal, state and local, that are tied to compensation. That's primarily unemployment taxes. Compensation to owners, you're going to fill in again, maximum $15,385, maximum for anyone, $15,385 total comp, including any benefits. You're going to add up your payroll costs, and you're going to get a number, whatever it is that you paid. So strategy 1, even with 0 people working, they've paid. Because they paid health insurance, whatever they've paid. Strategy 2, they've paid everything, and strategy 3, some percentage. Then you're going to choose a reference period. You're going to actually do the math on this to figure out what's most beneficial to you. You can use your comparison time frame 2019 and figure out your average number of employees for 2019. Or you can use January and February of 2020. Either way is acceptable. Figure out what's best for you, and then that's what you use. So you're going to list your number of employees during either 2019 or January, February of 2020. You're going to list your number of employees on June 30th, or if extended, whatever day is the last day. And you're going to divide those numbers. So in strategy 1, they have no employees. Anything divided by 0 is 0. So they're 0. They're not getting their loan forgiven. We'll see how that looks. Strategy 2, it's exactly the same number. So it's 1. They're going to multiply their forgiveness by 1, and they're going to get the full forgiveness amount. Strategy 3, we're dividing. So we divided, they had 12.5 employees, January and February or 2019. Now they have 9. So they just did a simple division, 9 divided by 12.5, they got 0.72. So they're going to get 0.72% of whatever they actually spent. So they do get forgiveness, just not full forgiveness. For those of you who, like me, don't think that it's right for your center to have everybody else back, you can do what's right for your center. The implication is you'll get a percentage of forgiveness, not all forgiveness. The rest of it will be a loan, right? Okay, now we get to, this is the most important piece, this in the next page. So look closely, and then we'll pause for questions. If there may be wage reductions, so just like you would divide the number of hours by the previous number of hours, and you'd get a percentage here. If you reduced everybody by 50%, you can reduce up to 25%. So you can have reduced everybody's hours by 20%. This isn't a problem. If you reduce by 25% or more, you have a reduction there. You're going to add up all of your expenses, payroll and non-payroll. So what these numbers is here, where you see my cursor, these are the total amount spent. So whatever you've spent, you've spent. Then you look here and you have whatever percentage of people on staff you have on staff. You're going to multiply line 6 by line 7. That's going to be your percentage. And that's how you're going to find out if you're not back at the full number of people you had before. This is how you're going to find out what your forgiveness is. So this is actually the most important page, your forgiveness amount calculation. So you use strategy 1, you haven't paid anyone any salary, your loan isn't forgiven, you have the loan, you have the money, it's 1% interest, you can use it, you'll pay it back. Strategy 2, we'll go down, full forgiveness. You've paid exactly what they've wanted you to do. You've used 75% on payroll, you've paid your people, you've used 25% on approved expenses, you have the documentation to prove you've done that, your whole loan is forgiven, including the interest accrued. So they'll also pay the interest for the amount of the loan that you're forgiven. Strategy 3, you're getting 0.72% of what you actually spent, not of your total loan amount, but what I've actually spent. So you can look, let me look at the numbers. You're also going to look at payroll costs. You have to have paid at least you have to have paid at least 75, not reduce their salaries or hours by more than 75%. So if you have, you're going to have to deduct for that as well. Okay. Right. So your forgiveness amounts, you take the smallest of lines 8, 9, and 10. So you can't, even if you spent more than your loan amount, they're not going to give you more than your loan amount. So in strategy 2, this was the loan amount, $85,467.98. Strategy 2, they actually paid about $108,000 more. They get this whole amount minus, once you get this amount, they're going to deduct whatever you got as an idle advance. So they'll get $75,467.98 returned. Strategy 3, it's been whatever they spent times 0.72 minus 10,000. In strategy 1, they haven't paid anybody. So they don't get the loan, but they do get to keep the 10,000 as a grant. They still get that. This is how it looks as of this moment in time. However, it will change. It would be shocking if it didn't change. It would be shocking if the Senate doesn't pass something. Exactly what is still unclear. So we'll have to really follow that. Then the end, we'll just end quickly, and then whoever wants to stay on for questions can stay on. You will get a copy of this presentation. My email is in it, and you can email me with other questions. I'm happy to do anything that I can to help you come out of this as strong as you possibly can. They're going to ask you for certifications. You're certifying that you're filling this out accurately, with integrity, you're not lying. You'll sign off on all those certifications. Then you need documentation. You need 3 kinds of documentation: documentation for your payroll costs, for your people costs, and for your non-payroll costs. Look through that really carefully. You need to keep those documents for 6 years. And at any point in the next 6 years, the SBA, the Department of Treasury, could decide they're going to audit you. So be ready with those documentation. Some of it you have to not only have in case you're audited, you need to submit with your forgiveness application. So things that you would expect, you'll go through the instructions, your bank account statements, tax forms, receipts, canceled checks, proving what you've paid. Full-time equivalent documentation, payroll reports, they'll list what are the approved forms. Something I didn't go over that's significant: what if an employee, you offer them a job back and they decline, they don't want to come back to work? You have a form It says, I've invited you back from furlough. Do you accept or you don't accept? If they check off, they don't accept, you can count them as having invited them back. I have, for example, now one employee out on maternity leave. She's coming back in 4 months. I'm holding her job for her. That's my legal ethical obligation. Although I'm not paying her, she counts because I'm holding her job for her. So there are certain examples of employees who you don't have back yet, but who can count in your numbers. If you have questions, checking with your accountant is good. I can answer to the best of my ability. Some of that, you'll have to be careful. You have to make sure that you have the right documentation there. And that's it. That's what the application is. It will take you time to sit through and fill out, but it's honestly what you would expect it to be. Any changes that happen based on legislation in Congress, and I'm sure the SBA will get an application out that will adapt. The one thing that almost all of Congress's legislation will only serve to make this better for you, for everybody. The one piece to watch is whether you absolutely have to spend 60% on payroll or have none of it forgiven. If that happens, you can do that. You'll have more time to start paying your people, so don't worry if you haven't done it yet. And you can get up to that 60% with bonuses. So there'll be ways to address it. You just have to have that in mind and make sure that you're protecting yourself so you get the best outcome possible for you. So that was a lot of information. We're already over the time that was scheduled, but for whoever wants to stay on the call, I'm happy to answer more questions, and you can certainly email me if you have additional questions. Gabriella, you want to ask questions?
Yes. First question, what if we hired everyone back on April 20th because we got our PPP money and our 12-week ends June 12th, and we have to place everyone on furlough again until we are able to bring them back? Will this be considered a not hired back for purpose of the June 30 deadline?
Yeah, don't put them on furlough until July 1st. If you have them back as of June 30th, and check with an accountant as well, or with your lender, to make sure that you're okay. I really feel for you. There are some people who really tried to do the right thing and act with goodness and are not benefiting from this. So if that's your situation, check with someone who knows more than me, check with an accountant, check with your lender.
Next question. My last week of payroll incurred will be 1 week of a 2-week period, which will be 2 weeks after my 56th day. Do I need to only count the 1 week of extended alternative date?
So the extended alternative is exactly 8 weeks. This is to avoid problems like you're experiencing. You start on the first day of payroll, and whether you pay people weekly or biweekly or monthly, it's clean because it's 8 weeks. So it could be 8 payrolls, it could be 4 payrolls, it could be 2 payrolls, but you're going by payroll. The last payroll, so you're paying those 8 weeks of incurred payroll count. That last payroll you won't pay till a week later, but as long as you pay by when you were always scheduled to pay payroll, that counts, so that you don't have to start with these adjustments and accounting calculations that would have been really complicated for people.
Following question, what are the limits on paying owners?
15,385 total.
Do you have someone to help fill out the application?
No, I'm just a daycare owner like you. I just figured this out so that I could know for my own business. There are lots of people out there willing to fill out your applications for payment. Use somebody trustworthy, use somebody you know. Michael knows I've been pretty enraged by people doing these seminars and then using them then to hire to offer their services for outrageous sums of money. This is volunteer work for me. It's a work of heart and passion. I want you guys to do well and come through this. I can answer questions by email. I'm running a daycare center full time, so and I'm not an accountant, so I'm not the person to fill it out for you. if you need more help. But yeah, there are many accountants out there who can help you fill that out if you feel that you want additional professional support to do it, and that's absolutely fine.
Following question. I'm the owner. I was not on payroll. However, my staff was on payroll. And can I add myself to the owner to loan? Thank you.
Yes, you can. So many owners are not on payroll. They take owner's draw. Your documentation will have to show what you paid yourself in 2019 or in January, February of 2020. And it has to be prorated the same amount. So you can't, if your center was losing money and you weren't paying yourself, you can't pay yourself now. But if you were paying yourself, you can pay yourself equal up to a cap maximum of $15,385. So if you were paying yourself more, it's capped at $15,385, but you definitely, as an owner, can and should pay yourself.
Next. I received PPP with 25 staff. I only have 14 staff now. Can I use bonuses to use the money's difference?
Yes. You're still going to divide 14 by 25 if that's where you are by June 30th. You may have more time and you may bring more people back. So it'll be a percentage of total pay, but you can definitely give bonuses.
Next question. So we have to actually be paying everyone June 30th for them to be count? Just being on the payroll but furloughed doesn't count as employed, even though we brought everyone back for our 8-week period, but that time ran out on June 12th.
They have to be invited back officially from payroll by June 30th to be counted, or by whatever date Congress extends this to. And I'm anticipating that it will be extended either to 16 weeks or to 24 weeks. We have to wait and see. But they have to be, there's a formal process. So you should have, it's considered best practice, best labor practice to have given them a letter saying you're placing them on furlough, and to give them a letter once you invite them back from furlough saying you're inviting them back from furlough. So there has to be a formal inviting them back from furlough for them to be counted in your equivalency count, unless there's some situation like I have, like somebody is on maternity leave, and then you need documentation of that as well.
Next, if 25% is not all utilized, utilities and rent, can it be compensation at a higher rate, so all forgiven?
Yeah, if you want to use up to 100% on approved payroll costs, you can do that. Absolutely. That was the purpose of the loan, to keep paying your people. It's just a maximum of 25%, or if Congress changes it, a maximum of 40% for other expenses. But if you want to use more on payroll, you're allowed to.
Next, we furloughed 27 employees before PPP came. The school was mandated closed after we received the PPP. Employees stayed on unemployment. Now we will open in the middle of June and will call back staff as warranted. Will their salaries be forgiven and the rest of the money be used as a loan if we do not end up with all 27 back?
You'll divide however many are back. So let's say you have 10 back. You'll do a simple calculation, 10 divided by 27. You'll get a percentage. You'll multiply that by their total compensation. And then that's the amount that's forgiven. Go through the application. I know that this sounds very abstract. And for people like me who are educators and not business people or accountants, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around. If you need to look at the application and then email me, you're welcome to do that.
Next question. The SBA EIDL loan covers what kind of expenses?
Operating expenses. There are very few restrictions on that. So the SBA EIDL loan is so that you can keep running. EIDL loans have existed for a very long time. They're used, they were used for Katrina, for Hurricane Sandy, for disasters where people are put out of business for a period of time or are damaged. This is the first time the whole nation needed idle, that the whole nation was declared a disaster area. So the SBA is having trouble keeping up with it, but it's in theory, if you were hit during Hurricane Sandy, they would give you up to 6 months of operating expenses. They probably don't have the money now to give you that much money. So I don't know what they're capping it at, but you can use that for anything you need to run your business. So that's much less restrictive. And that loan you have 30 years to pay back. If you're a nonprofit, it's at 0.275% interest. And if you're a for-profit, it's 3.75% interest. So it's about the most favorable terms for a loan that you can find.
Next question. Can I use the EIDL for shade cover so we can spend more time outside?
Yes.
What if full-time for us is 35 hours?
That's okay. You can still, that's fine. Then you count it as 35 hours. The reason that 40 hours was good, it's just the math works out better if you're figuring out, how many people really are full-time instead of part-time. But I think that's fine. If 35 hours for you is full-time, that's full-time. Probably want to check further. You can research that. I'm not sure, but I think you're fine. Okay.
We have 21 employees, but only have 19 working since March 1st, 2020, before COVID, because they were on maternity leave. Do I say we have 21 employees or 19? Employees versus working employees is different.
Yeah.
Employees that are on maternity leave are not planning to be back until September. We are in week 4 of our PPP loan.
Yeah. So if you have documentation from them that they're on maternity leave, meaning either they're on paid family leave and you have that documentation from the insurance, or they've written you a letter formally requesting maternity leave and you have their signature that they want to be out, you are legally obligated to give them that time and to hold their job for them. And then although you're not paying them, they count in your full-time equivalency numbers. So if you have 19 working and 2 on a maternity leave, you've got all your people back. You're fine. You don't have to reduce the amount of what you've spent.
Next question. We have 80 employees in after school and 100 in summer camps. Are we considered seasonal business? What is the definition?
Yeah, that's beyond the scope of my knowledge. For summer camps, I can't imagine that you wouldn't be considered seasonal business. Read through the application and then you're allowed to choose kind of any 8-week period. There are different rules for seasonal workers. That's not something that I know about. But read the application first. You can probably figure it out on your own. And if not, you can check with an accountant.
Next, I have an employee who rehired to work for 3 weeks and is now on medical leave for 8 weeks. Will she be counted against me?
No, you can, as long as you have documentation, I believe you'll want to check this with an accountant. I'm going to check it as well. But as you keep documentation that she's on medical leave, that means that, labor law, you're required to hold her position for her. She counts in your full-time equivalency, even though you're not paying her right now because she's on unpaid leave. Maybe she's on paid leave and you're paying her, but if she's on unpaid leave, then she still counts. You haven't taken her off your payroll. She's just on leave and you're holding her position for her.
Next question. Where is that noted form regarding documentation that offered job and employee declined or accepted?
The SBA doesn't give it to you. I am not a lawyer. I do have the form that I use that was approved by my HR specialist. If you email me, I will share it with you with a disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer and I'm not offering legal advice, and I would recommend that you clear it with somebody who knows more than me.
Next question. Where can I find the form to ask employee to come back from being furloughed?
You have to create it. I can create a template for you, again, with the stipulation that I am not expert in labor law. But I did create something for my center that was reviewed by my HR specialist. But again, with caveat that, you know, once you get into labor law, I'm in New York. If you're in another state, it may really be different. So you should check with somebody on that to make sure that you're doing this legally based on requirements for your state.
Next question. Would we claim the $10,000 as income on our taxes regarding EIDL grant? And do we have to show how we use it?
So yes, you claim it on your taxes, and exactly how it's taxed, I don't know, but you definitely need to declare it. And I am keeping documentation of what I use the idle funds for. It's unlikely that you're going to be audited for that, but theoretically you could be. But the idle grant can be used, it's very flexible. It can be used for operating costs. You just can't use it, you can't double dip, so you can't use it for the same thing you're using the PPP for, meaning, you know, keep the money and say you're using it for something that you got PPP for.
Next question. We did a 2-week payroll for 1 week once we got funds, but the last payroll will be 1 week of the 2-week period, and the payday is 2 weeks after the 8th week. But 1 week is during that last payroll, or should I only pay the staff for 1 week?
So the SBA clarified this because it was going to be very confusing. So I do hear that there's confusion around the alternative pay period. Read the application. If you still have questions, you're welcome to email me. If you have 8 weeks of payroll, let's say you pay every 2 weeks. So within 8 weeks, there are 4 calculated payroll periods. Forget for a moment when you pay the people, but the first day of the first payroll after, meaning first day that you're calculating towards payroll, you go 2 weeks, you pay them. You go 2 weeks, you pay them, right? For 4 payrolls. That last payroll you pay a week later, but it's 8 weeks that are clean for payroll costs incurred. What you paid, what the costs you incurred, meaning what you owed employees for those 8 weeks. The last one you're going to pay a week later. It's still counted as long as you pay it by that regular payday and you don't wait 2 months or however many long you pay. So this was designed because people were going crazy saying, okay, no, maybe if it ends mid-time, I'll try to get the last little bit in and I'll issue a short payroll just for a week or just for 2 days. It's 8 weeks clean. So that should alleviate all of those accounting challenges.
Following question. What if you use Schedule C net income divided by 12 to get the owner's pay? How would you hand the owner's pay for 8 weeks?
You take divided by 12 times 2 for 8 weeks, and that's what it is. Not more than 15,385.
Next question. Our PPP money came in on day 7 in our 10-day payroll cycle. We do biweekly payroll. Each payroll cycle is always 10 days long. We did 1 payroll cycle from day 1 through day 6 from our regular bank account. Then we did 1 payroll cycle, day 7 to day 10, from our bank accounts where the PPP money was deposited. Should payroll day 1 through 6 also be deducted from our PPP loan as it fell in our biweekly payroll cycle? We did not receive the money until day 7 in our payroll cycle.
Yeah, so you're using the regular covered period, not the alternative covered period. Days 1 through 6 don't count. If you want days 7 through 10 to count, you can use the regular cycle, or you can start just with day 1 of the new cycle as the alternative covered period. As for having taken that from your separate bank account, you'd have to ask your lender how to handle that. You might, kind of reimburse that bank account or something. I'm not sure how that accounting would work, but your lender would be able to tell you if you decide you want the alternative payroll period instead of the regular payroll period, which you're using now, and that might actually work for you, and that could be fine. That's a choice you need to make.
Next question. Will you please send me the PowerPoint?
Yeah, we'll send everybody the PowerPoint.
Follow up with the Schedule C calculations. Do I pay myself each payroll or a lump sum or each time I make payroll for the employees?
Totally doesn't, they don't care. As long as you have the documentation of what you paid, you can do it however you usually do it, however works for you.
And this is the last question in our Q&A, but we have a couple in the chat. As a solo proprietary, can I pay myself if I'm not in payroll?
Yes, if you paid yourself in 2019 and you can document that, or you paid yourself in January or February of 2020 and you can document that, you can, absolutely. And that's up to a maximum of $15,385 total compensation, including any benefits you give yourself.
Okay. When Congress is talking about 24 or the 16 weeks rather than 8, does that apply to payroll, or is that still just 8 weeks?
It applies to everything. So you don't only have then 8 weeks of rent, of utilities, or of payroll. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe it just extends the time that you have to use the money you've always been given. You're not getting additional money, but you have more time to spend down the money that you've been given.
What if we pay 2 times a month? Can we still use the first day of the next payroll after we receive the money?
Okay, so there's a lot of confusion around this alternative payroll. They're paying for 8 weeks. Whether you pay twice a month, once a week, it doesn't matter. They're paying for 8 weeks. So you start the day you start calculating payroll until for 8 weeks. And it's what was incurred, meaning what you owe employees for that time, even if you pay it a little bit later. At the last payroll, you would be paying a little bit later. That's normal.
Is day of loan application the same as date funded deposit, or day one submitted, or day I submitted to bank, or day I submitted to SBA?
Really, honestly, that doesn't, if you're talking about that piece of the application that asks how many employees you had the day the application was submitted, that number doesn't go into any calculation. I'm not even sure why they're asking it. So I would say that the day you submitted your application to your lender, but I honestly wouldn't worry about that number. I don't even understand why they're asking it. Your calculations are relevant. That's the day the money was deposited in your bank. If not all the money was deposited at once, that apparently happened for some people, it's when the first monies were deposited in your bank. If you start calculating from there.
Next question. My loan ends on June 12th. I had everyone on payroll. After that day, I can no longer pay all staff at full rate. So most will go onto unemployment as of June 15th. Is that okay?
You're going to have to figure out how to pay them, I think, till June 30th. On that one, this is beyond my expertise, and I would advise you to check with an accountant, your lender, an attorney, somebody who knows more than me, because calculations are happening as of how many people you have on staff on June 30th. That may be extended, so you may have some more time. Likely will be extended. So, but prepare yourself for, if it's not changed, if it's 16 weeks, if it's 24 weeks, what would happen in your particular circumstance.
Next question. Can I hire my daughter to do work in the center since we are closed and all staff's on employment?
don't know is the honest question. If you're hiring your daughter and not hiring back furloughed, you might get into trouble for that, but I don't know the answer. I would check with an attorney on that.
We were funded on May 11th, and the first day of our scheduled payroll starts May 18th. So it's okay to go 8 weeks from there. So payroll period ends on July 10th, but pays on July 22nd. That's okay. We
That's
pay
okay.
bi-weekly.
That's okay. Totally fine. That's what the SBA is designing so that this can be cleaner. Yes.
Next question. I have been paying staff not working. Can I stop now if PPP loan is extended and let them go back on unemployment and then rehire them when I need them when enrollment is up?
Yes. You can. Wait to see what Congress passes, I would say is probably wise so that you know what you're dealing with. But yeah, there are a lot of options for centers here. And so you're going to want to think about what's going to make most sense for you.
Next question. We have had several staff choose to retire, move out of state, take other jobs, etc. They receive PPP payment for most of the period, but not all. How will this affect our repayments or / forgiveness?
It doesn't. I mean, you pay them what you're going to need from them if you've offered them a job back and they've declined it. So you've offered them a job and they say, no, thank you, I'm retiring. No, thank you, I'm moving out of state. I don't want to work for you anymore. I can't work for you anymore. You need that in writing, and then they can count in your staff numbers. But you need the documentation in writing from them.
All right. Next, someone just wants confirmation that the webinar is being recorded, and if it is, where can they find it?
Yes, it's being recorded. I believe that you can find it on Kangaroo Time's YouTube channel as of soon, maybe as soon as tomorrow. And I believe that it will also, Michael, jump in, be posted on the webpage of the Westchester Child Care Council.
Probably, but Genevieve from Kangaroo Time said she will be sending out a link to the presentation as well as the full recording. The full recording will be on YouTube, so she'll send out that link that people will be able to click on. So everyone who is registered will receive that.
Next question. 8 weeks equal 56 days, not 5-day work week?
Yeah, 56 days.
Next, what if the loan ends in the middle of a pay period? How is that figured?
So you have an option. You can either prorate based on the number of days in the pay period, or you can use the alternative pay period where it'll be clean. So you just, you start your calculations on the first day of the first payroll after you receive the loan, not the day you receive the loan. That's going to make the most sense probably for 90% or more of centers. There may be reasons it doesn't make sense for you, but that makes the accounting much cleaner.
Next, I use EIDL for my health insurance, but everyone is furloughed. Is this forgiven?
So if everybody's furloughed and your loan's not going to be forgiven, then you can use EIDL for health insurance. If you end up hiring people back, the time is extended, you use EIDL for payroll expenses, including healthcare, then the EIDL money would need to be used for something else because you can't use, two sums of money from both sources for the same expense, which makes sense.
If the compensation for owner was smaller the same period last year, can it be higher this 8-week period and forgiven but capped at $15,385?
So the owner's compensation, you have to choose one of two periods. What the average owner's comp was for 2019, so 12, right? Whatever the owner got for 2019, divide that by 12, multiply it by 2, that's the average for 8 weeks. Or what the owner got January, February, whatever's more beneficial to you, you can use. And that's how you figure out the number, the appropriate number.
Is capped amount of $15,385 payroll and bonus or just bonus?
compensation. You can't get forgiven for any person, owner, employee, nobody, more than the amount of $15,385. You can pay them more. You can do whatever you want. It's your business, but you can't be forgiven for more than that amount.
If you don't currently have a 401k, can you open one and use the PPP?
Yes.
Sorry, I mean, you can apply for forgiveness, but you will not know for a long time if you were forgiven. So if the loan states you must start paying back in December, does that mean we should pay back the loan then?
Yeah, so that you're going to work out, your lender's going to be sending you statements, and you have 6 months before you have to start paying back. Interest is accruing during those 6 months. Now, the interest is as low as it gets at 1%. If the loan is forgiven, the amount forgiven for the time it was forgiven, the interest will also be forgiven. Otherwise, you'll owe the interest. So 6 months after you got the loan, your bills from your lender are going to start telling you the amount that you owe, and that's when you'll start paying. It is very possible that you'll have to start paying back before you know how much was forgiven. And then you'll have to have a conversation with your lender about that.
Next question. I just got PPP loan approved money. Is not deposited in the bank yet. June 30th is still my deadline?
Yes, which is crazy. So you'll have to have people on the amount. You'll be able to spend it later, but they'll be deciding, what percentage you get forgiven based on how many people are on your payroll on June 30th, or later if Congress extends it. So you'll have to make a decision about how many people you want on payroll as of June 30th.
What is the interest rate on the EIDL loan?
2.75% if you're a nonprofit and 3.75% if you're a for-profit. You have 30 years to pay back that one.
If staff refuses to return from furlough prior to June 30th, will we be penalized on our 630 FTE count because of this?
Not if you have it in writing that they've refused to come back. So you need it documented, and you need them actually to sign that they understand they were offered a job and they're declining it. If they don't, you can check with labor. Well, you'll have to figure that out. Some of it will get a little bit messy, and you'll need either an attorney who knows labor law for your state. It may differ by state, or a really good HR specialist who knows labor law for your state.
Sarah, if I can jump in on that, because I've heard this from a number of people. Because of the extra $600 that's been paid in unemployment claims, a lot of people are being made better off stay home than they would be by working. And this has happened in a number of cases I've heard where they have refused to come back. In some of those cases, they aren't answering calls. They're not returning texts. They don't want to be bothered. They just want to stay home and collect their extra money. Question for you. The employers can then hire additional employees, right? If the employee doesn't respond after a certain point, they're considered terminated and they can hire new employees.
So yes, you can hire new employees. Also, depending on your employee handbook, it is in many handbooks that failure to show up to work for more than 3 days is grounds for termination. Not responding to you is grounds for termination. For this, you'll want to check with, a labor attorney in your state. You may choose to terminate them for cause. In that case, they're unlikely qualified for unemployment. How that all plays out with the overload of unemployment right now, who knows? But yeah, that may not be a person you want back. And yes, you can hire somebody else back.
Next question. Would a Zona machine be allowed?
I don't know what a Zona machine is. If it's something for disinfecting, then as of this moment in time, no, but possibly by the time Congress passes legislation, potentially, because the Senate is talking about allowing for PPP and sanitizing and other COVID, making workplaces COVID safe, allowable as a non-payroll expense. We'll have to wait to see what's in the legislation that comes out of Congress.
Okay. We continue to pay our part-time staff throughout the 8-week period. Will their payroll costs be forgiven too?
Yes. Again, you're determining based on full-time equivalents. So if they're half-time, they count as half a staff person when you figure out your numbers. If they're 20% time, you had kind of people who come in for a few hours, they're 20% of a full-time equivalent, and you just figure out those numbers, and yeah, absolutely they count.
Okay, next question. Can we include payroll fees paid to payroll company?
No, that's not an approved cost.
Next question is, what if the owner is the director?
It's fine. That's totally okay. And then whether the owner is the director and however your tax structure is set up, whether you're the owner director on payroll or whether you're the owner director taking a draw, you're still paying yourself no more than $15,385. You can give bonuses. You can give bonuses to an owner director, but again, not more than in the amount of $15,385 total compensation.
Next question. Are FTEs only people who were paid during the time period versus number of people that were employed? Basically, am I only counting active employees versus all employees for FTE calculations?
I don't know. It depends what you mean by active as opposed to non-active. There's a lot of different categories of people, so you'd have to really check. If they're on furlough, it doesn't count. If they're on medical leave or maternity leave, they do count. So, you'll have to, each situation is a little bit different.
Next question. Is the percentage of liability insurance, disability, and compensation insurance and MLF portion included in deduction?
The portion that the employee owns is. So what you pay your employees gross is forgivable. The additional amount that you owe as an employer is not forgivable. That doesn't count.
Page 9 of application. What does average FTE mean and hourly wage reduction mean?
That is, so average FTE is FTE is full-time employee, the average number of full-time employees. Wage reduction is, did you reduce salaries? Either just give everybody a salary cut, which sometimes employers do, or reduce their hours. You can up to 25% without penalty. If you've reduced salaries and wages of people who make under $100,000 a year, there's a percentage less that you're then forgiven for. You can reduce salaries of people who make over $100,000 a year. There's a distinction made based on how much comp people get.
What about if some employees refuse to return back to work and email resignation?
They email you a resignation, that's your documentation. If they don't, you can assume them terminated and hire somebody else. Again, you'll want to check, you might, in certain cases, want to check with an attorney who knows labor law or a really good HR specialist, depending on the circumstances of the particular case.
If I had 20 full-time employees, but some of those do not come back, but I hire ones to replace them, does that make the numbers?
Yes. Doesn't have to be exactly the same people. It has to be the same number of people.
Next. So does it matter if the full-time employee number is made up of new and old employees?
It can be made up of new and old employees. You can hire new people. That's allowed.
Is there a max of how much you can pay out for hazard pay?
Well, not really. I mean, you can't pay anyone more than 15,385, so that's the max, but you can be generous with your hazard pay.
Any seasonal closures info available to share?
That's beyond my area of expertise. My center is full-time, full year, so it's a good question. And you would need to, there's information out there if you start Googling seasonal workers, and I'm sure there are accountants out there who could help you more than I can with seasonal workers. The difference really is it's similar. It's just that the comparison periods you have more flexibility with for seasonal workers.
Next question. Where can we find the application?
On the SBA website and in the link that was sent with this webinar. So if you go back to the email you got inviting you to this webinar, I think it's on Kangaroo Time's Facebook page as well. You can find the link, but if you also just Google SBA Paycheck Protection Plan forgiveness application, you'll find it easily.
But I just want to reiterate what Jared said earlier. The application for forgiveness goes to the bank that gave you the loan. They will most likely require that SBA application in addition to their own, but you are not to send the application to SBA. You need to send it to the bank that gave you.
Right, and your bank will let you know how to do that. It's probably going to be online. It'll probably look similar to the SBA application, but there may very well be there likely will be differences for each lender. The principles and how they come out with the forgiveness amount will be the same.
Next question. When you say if you invite an employee back and they refuse, you can count them. What does that mean?
Meaning when on June 30th, when you're figuring out what your full-time equivalency is. So if I had, on February 1st, February 15th, if I had 18 employees and on June 30th, I have 15 employees, I have to divide 15 divided by 18. And that's, I only get a percentage of what I spent back. But if I have 15 people back and 2 who refuse to come back, and I have that in writing, and 1 on maternity leave, and I have that in writing, then I have my full 18. So even though I'm not paying them, even though they may not be with me, if I have the documentation that in good faith I tried to bring them back, but either because they're on paid leave through insurance, even if I'm not paying, unpaid leave for approved reasons, or if they've refused to come back, then I'm not penalized for that. That was changed midway through the process when what Michael was talking about was becoming evident, where people were saying, I want to stay on unemployment, I don't want to come back to work. So employers were given some flexibility based on, people refusing to come back. And it certainly helps for cases like maternity leave, where you're required to hold the position for the person until they're ready to come back, or medical leave. Any other questions?
Yes. Is it okay if you were out on furlough before it was going to be a problem?
I don't know what before it was going to be a problem. Oh, meaning okay. If this means that your center was financially shaky before COVID pandemic and you had furloughed people, does it still count? That's a really good question. I'm assuming it does. Your pre-crisis levels of staff would be low. You would really have to check with an accountant on that. If I'm understanding the question correctly. I may not be. If not, feel free to email me and I can try to answer or let you know if it's beyond what I know.
Next question. We pay our staff bi-monthly, so our pay periods run from the 1st to the 15th, then from the 16th to the end of the month. How does this 8-week repayment period work with that schedule?
Yeah, so from the first, you're fine. From the first day, you'll do the alternative payroll probably. For the first day of the first new payroll, after you get your money, you'll count out 8 weeks. And that will equal 4 payrolls. And if it extends to 16 or 24 weeks, then you can extend it.
Okay, next question. What if I lost 3 employees because of COVID reasons, their health, but I have 3 college kids back and they are working now?
You're fine. If your full-time equivalent count is the same, doesn't matter if they're the same people or different people.
Next question. What if teachers do not want to come back because they are afraid?
They need to let you know that in writing. Now, there are some difficult ethical dilemmas for you in that, because once they let you know that in writing, they're no longer entitled to unemployment. How that's actually going to play out is unclear in the mess that exists in unemployment right now. But, you know, you need, for them to be in your count, you need documentation that you offered them the job back, and they declined.
Next questions. What if teachers do not want to come back because they are afraid?
The same I just answered. You'll either let them stay on for, you'll have a choice to make as an employer. You'll either say, I don't have enough, I'll let them stay out on furlough indefinitely, or I've invited them back and they've declined, which technically means that they're not eligible for unemployment anymore. And if they decline for you, it means that they count in your count. So you'll have to make some decisions about what you want to do.
PPP loan was received on May 6th, Wednesday. The first payroll was May 8th, Friday, which covered April 27th through May 8th.
Yeah. So that is if you're not using the alternative payroll. Unless there's a really good reason not to, which there may well be, it's much cleaner in terms of accounting to just start with the alternative payroll with the first day of the first payroll after the money was deposited, because otherwise you're going to have to do a lot of accounting calculations to figure out what's included.
Next, the 75% and 25% amount are for the loan amounts spent, not given, correct? I was given more money than I required for 8 weeks. I'm self-employed and my 8 weeks income is below 75% of the total loan amount, but will be over 75% of amount spent.
Yeah. So you're not going to get all of it forgiven. I'm not sure what the lenders are going to do in that case. In that case, what I would do is figure out the calculations for what would 25% be for non-payroll expenses, and not pay any more than that for non-payroll expenses.
Next question. I was denied the EIDL loan, but given the $10,000 grant. According to my loan office, I do not have to pay that back. Is that still included in the calculations?
Yeah, it's included in the calculations. You don't have to pay it back to them. However, if you got it, you have to declare it, and they'll give you $10,000 less on your PPP forgiveness.
Okay, next question. My question is, the alternative dates will be May 11th, Monday through 7/3, which is 56 days. Payroll will be paid until July 10th. So would July 10th payroll count?
Yes, because it was accrued during the 8 weeks. You pay it after, because that's how payroll works. But the SBA organized it so that businesses don't have to change up when their payroll is, and it can be very clean accounting.
If we open our doors back up on June 1st and ask all staff who are comfortable returning on site work to come back, would the staff who refuse to return be considered refusing to return for PPP purposes?
Yes. So what you would do, this would be considered best practice, is you would send letters to everybody, formal letters, inviting them to return from furlough and requiring them to check, I will come back or I won't come back. And then if they're checking they won't come back, then you have your documentation that you tried to bring them back.
For the FTE count, there's no distinction made between new or old employees. Is it a snapshot of total FTE as a specific date?
Yeah, June 30th as of now. But with the legislation currently in Congress, it will likely be extended, but it will still be a specific date in time.
Can EIDL be forgiven if I use it for other operating expenses not covered by PPP? Or is there any situation where a business can use both PPP and EIDL as grants?
No, EIDL is a loan. It's not a grant. The advance up to $10,000 is a loan, sort of. It's a loan unless you've also gotten a PPP, in which that's considered double dipping. So the principle here to understand is there can't be, these are two funding sources, both from the SBA, that can't be used for the same thing. So you can't get more than 100% forgiveness of the PPP loan. 100,000 plus 10,000 is more than 100% forgiveness. So they're going to deduct that 10,000 or less, if it was 3,000 because you had 3 employees, whatever it was, they're going to it's not a grant, it's a loan if you had the PPP as well. Now it's then in essence refinanced by the PPP so that you're paying 1% interest, not the 2.75 or 3.75 that you would for the EIDL, but that's how it's being handled.
Next, for staff on furlough, aren't we holding their positions for them, just like someone who is on FMLA?
Yeah, but you have to bring them back. So furlough is your choice. FMLA is their choice. So if you don't bring them back by June 30th, they don't count in your count. You haven't brought them back and you're not paying them. If somebody is on FMLA, you want to bring them back, but they're on FMLA. So according to the law, you can't. You have to give them their time and save their position. So therefore, you have the flexibility of them being counted in your full-time equivalency count because you're holding their position, because it's your legal and ethical requirement to do so. Furloughing people was your choice, your business choice. It's not a legal and ethical requirement to furlough somebody, anybody, ever.
Next question. Will you, one of my assistants just stopped coming to work. I never let her go. Later I learned from her she gets more money on unemployment. I offered her to return to work. She stopped answering my texts. She never gives me an answer. What I need to do for documentation of her refuse to work. She says she gets more money from unemployment.
Yeah, so you have a choice at that point. If you don't have the documentation, you could choose to terminate her. Technically, that would mean that she's no longer going to get her unemployment. Again, how it actually plays out, I don't know. And I do believe you'd have to check with a lawyer that in this case, it depends on the state. In some states, usually it's the employee who reports to Department of Labor. You may have an obligation as an employer to report that to the Department of Labor. I don't know. You need to check with an attorney on that, but you certainly could fire her. Whatever happens for her with unemployment, let's not even worry about. Whatever that is, it is, and you could hire somebody else.
Next question. Do you have any idea when they might decide on the rehire deadline date extension?
So Congress is discussing it as we speak. The Senate, the House passed it last week. The Senate is discussing it as we speak. Mitch McConnell is saying soon. What he means by soon, I can't give a definition to that. They're trying. Conceivably, it could be as early as this week, but maybe not. We'll just have to follow the news to see.
Is the day of loan application the same as date funded deposit, or day I submitted to bank, or day they submitted it to SBA? Thank you. This is very informative.
Okay. No, the date you applied is the date that you applied with your lender. The date you received is the date the money was in your bank account. The date your lender sent it to the SBA, no one's going to ask you that. They won't even assume you necessarily know that. So that date doesn't matter. So the real date that matters most is the day that the money was deposited in your bank.
Next, do we have to give them accrual time if they are on furlough?
I'm not sure what accrual time means. If it means that so you can email me, but this is probably for somebody who knows labor law in your state. For me, my return from furlough letter states really clearly that you are not being penalized for any accrued vacation time or leave time or sick time. It all continues exactly as it was before furlough. That might be different by state, and depending on state, you know how much your Department of Labor requires and how much leeway you have as a small business. You'll have to check with somebody who knows labor law in your state.
There's a next question. I believe you already answered it, but maybe you can answer it again. Is the percentage of liability insurance, disability, and compensation insurance and MLF portion included in deduction?
Again, deduction is gross amount you pay your employees. You can't count the taxes, federal taxes, that you contribute as an employer. You can count state and local taxes. That's primarily state unemployment tax, but that may vary by locality, city, and by state.
By when do you apply for forgiveness? I received the loan on May 1st, so by when do I need to apply for forgiveness?
So that's $1 million question. The SBA has not been clear on that. What they do say is that the absolute last day is, I put it in, I think October 31st. So once you get to the end of the 8-week period or the 16-week period, the 24-week period, you're going to apply. You can definitely wait the week until you get your documentation if you're using the alternative payroll period to get in your documentation. If you're waiting for documentation on state unemployment insurance that you're submitting, you can wait for that and then submit it. So you can wait to get your documentation in order. Once you have your documentation in order, it's to your advantage to submit then as quickly as you can, because your lender has, remember, 60 days to submit this to the SBA, and then this SBA has 90 days to get back to your lender. So you're talking about 5 months in which you don't know if that money is going to be forgiven or not.
Next question. Can we use one time frame for comparison purposes for owners and different one for the rest of the staff? Example, can we use January and February for owners and average from 2019 for staff?
That's a good question. You'll have to really look carefully in the documentation. I think you have to choose one comparison unit and be consistent with it. But you can definitely check with your lender on that. And whatever your lender says is what you should go with.
Can I count myself that has to stay home to care for her 3 children? Can you call everyone on part-time?
Yes, you can do whatever you want, meaning you can furlough them, you can reduce salaries, you can raise salaries, you can make them part-time, but there are consequences in the loan. So if you reduce people's wages or time more than 25%, you're not going to get as much of the loan forgiven as if you don't do that. But it might make sense for your business, so you might choose to do that regardless.
Next question. I received a micro loan less than $15K, which covers less than the payroll for current employees. Would I still need to rehire the one employee that was furloughed?
If the micro loan was a PPP loan, yes. There are other organizations giving micro loans, so it's not clear to me from the question. But if it's a PPP loan, the same requirements apply regardless of the amount of the loan. The only difference is that if you got, which is probably very few, if any, childcare centers, if you got $2 million or more, you will definitely be audited. If you didn't, they might audit you. I think likely they won't. I think they don't have the time and they're overwhelmed, and daycare centers are not going to be on their radar for this, but you do have to have your documentation just in case.
What was the extension that was passed through the House?
So the House is giving 24 weeks to use the funds instead of 8 weeks. We'll see what the Senate does.
Okay. Apply for loan through a bank where we did not have an account. So bank mailed a check for PPP loan when approved. Check dated May 7th, but we did not receive until May 11th and deposited it that day. Does 8 weeks start May 7th or May 11th?
That's a really good question. You're going to have to check with the lender. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, and then we have 2 more questions. Will a certificate of attendance be available for this webinar for in-service training credit?
Yes, I believe it is. That's an answer. That's a question for Kangaroo Time, but I believe that they do send certificates.
And last question, apply for the loan through a bank where we did not have an account. Oh, it's the same question. They just asked on both. I apologize. So it is a wrap for questions.
Okay. Well, thank you all. I just want to end by saying I'm really passionate about doing anything in my power to help childcare centers. I'm in this with you. So my email is shira@discoveryvillagecenter.com. It's at the front of the slides. You'll get the deck. If you want to email me, I'm happy to do whatever I can to help. And I wish you Godspeed, health, and hope, and success, and be well all.
Okay, Cheryl, we're good. Thank you very much. Excellent work, and take care, everybody. Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you. Be well. Bye-bye.
Have a good one, everybody.